The gates are open, and you've arrived. We've been waiting for you. Welcome to the outer court.
I Scry with My Little Eye by Thomas Stoneking, read by J. Myers. One year removed from my time in service, I struggle to think back on it. With one exception, there was nothing especially significant about my time in. I have no glorious war stories to account for, no firefights waged in desert hovels, or explosives disposed of. I have only fond memories of Iraq and Afghanistan, viewing them pleasantly from 30,000 feet, monitoring center line and ensuring we were on time to get gas. I do not say this as a point of pride, only to set the stage for the juxtaposition of the experience that does not belong. The exception, the one exciting moment in my career, was an emergency landing of our heavy Boeing 707 in the swamps of Middle Georgia. The Accident Investigation Board had determined the probable cause to be fuel exhaustion. We'd run out of gas. I was a rated officer back then, a navigator. Too dumb to be a pilot, not dumb enough to be a backseater. And I suppose it was the nature of our flights, 8 to 12-hour sorties and my own nature, a sharp memory and a proclivity for daydreaming mixed together, that have allowed me to view in crystalline aspect my time in the service. Except for one instance. And therein lies the struggle, the reason for this memoir. I write this account of events because I do not want to forget again, and because I have made decisions whose ramifications are the reason I am alive, and others are not. Polybius was fond of saying the purpose of tragic poetry was to astound and entertain, but that history's purpose, unadulterated in as much as it was possible, was to educate the reader. I suppose at the heart of this tale, then, is an educational call. If anyone who reads this should ever find themselves staring into the inky abyss of the void, two black pools of eyes, ancient and terrible, and be tempted to despair, remember that the human spirit is indomitable. Remember you need not go quietly into that good night. Remember to keep your flame lit. For all the sharpness of my memory, it faltered back then. It stumbled and failed me when I thought back on the downing of that jet. Only now do I realize things didn't make sense. Things didn't add up. The calculus and incorrect summation my imaginary teacher refused to acknowledge. We'd taken off max bags out of Robbins with 125,000 pounds of fuel. Our dated Pratt & Whitney engines burning 12,000 an hour at cruise, 13 to 15 on climb out and approach. Assuming a conservative burn of 13 for the entirety of the sortie, we could have taken off, flown the hour to our orbit, and stayed on station for 6 hours without issue, and still have enough fuel to arrive back at base with our minimum required 15,000 overhead. We'd only stayed on station 5 hours, so how exactly had we run out of fuel? This was a point of pride for me. My job as a navigator wasn't exactly challenging, especially not during a local training sortie. A good nav thought ahead, thought of what pilots needed before they knew they needed it, and made it his job to make the pilots' lives as easy as possible. So if I stick at this point, I refuse to let it be explained away as mere forgetfulness on the part of 4 crewmen who were preoccupied with deteriorating weather. It is because, yes, it is a matter of professional pride for me. Compounding this issue is another I can't explain. For the life of me, I can't remember why I didn't push back at the time. Why hadn't I spoken to leadership, poked, prodded? The official AIB report put out some 6 months after the crash stated a failure of our radios precipitated the accident in conjunction with the presence of severe turbulence that hadn't been forecasted in our weather brief that morning, the final cause being our fuel status. That 9 of the 21 souls on board survived the ordeal, found in the marshes of Middle Georgia, was a testament to the bravery and resourcefulness of our crew, who fought against spatial disorientation and rapidly dwindling emergency airfield options to lay the jet down somewhere safe. That was the official line. But I don't remember any bad weather or turbulence. I don't remember our UHF or VHF radios having any issues at all. In fact, I have no recollection of anything past the takeoff of that sortie. So for a long while, I was content to let the matter rest. Wasn't aware there was a matter at all, frankly, until the dreams started. I should clarify that there are 4 words no navigator ever wants to hear. Nav, where are we? The dream always started with that question, asked by the pilot in command. It was always Major Beck, the most competent individual I think I've ever met. In the dream, I flail, looking at my navigation solution on our flight management system, not understanding the discrepancy between our GPS and internal navigation units. The former solution is rejected. It's showing dashes, meaning no source data, no satellite signal. The latter is showing us right where we should be, 60 nautical miles north of base, in the descent, doing 420 knots true airspeed, 7 nautical miles a minute. Pilot, nav got us about 10 minutes north of base, I say. There's a pause on FlightNet. The pilot and co-pilot discussing something I can only hear because their chatter is occasionally loud enough to get picked up by their mics. Their tone is not quite panicked, but there's a disturbing element to the urgency I hear. Nav pilot, we're tracking the same, but come up here for a sec. I take the time to let the mission crew commander know on a separate net I'll be going off headset. As a nav, I don't have any windows at my workstation. Mine is the only seat on the jet that doesn't. I pass the crew area and join Major Beck, the pilot in command, Captain Roach, the co-pilot, and Staff Sergeant James, the flight engineer, on the flight deck. Major Beck has one ear uncovered from his headset so he can hear me speak. He's turned to watch me approach, and his look is strange, baffled. He points towards his window with a thumb. I look outside, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking for. It's the beginning of summer, and a vista of green is all I notice for a long while, but it continues to be all I see. I begin to understand the problem, just as Major Beck puts words to my growing realization. "Where's I-75?" he asks. Not accusatory, but certainly demanding. We're on an IFR clearance using our instruments to fly. We don't need to fly using visual landmarks, but it doesn't hurt to use them if you have the spare brain bites. I turn my attention to the whiskey compass. It shows a direct southbound heading of 180. This matches the direction indicated by the INUs, but again, the GPS solution is stating no available data. I grow more concerned as I look back out the pilot's windshield and realize it's not just I-75 southbound I can't find, but any streets, highways, lights of any kind for that matter. There are no street lamps, no headlights from cars on back roads, nothing, anywhere. The city of Robbins isn't a sprawling metropolis by any means, but even it should be visible on a clear, cloudless day sortie. Instead, there's just green. Green everywhere for miles and miles. In the dream, a disquieting unease fills me, and at first, I think it's because I've somehow, unbelievably, gotten us off course. I turned to run back to my workstation and check my moving map display and see the true source of my unease. The back half of the aircraft's fuselage has been ripped away, and in its place, a giant eye hovers, honing in on me. I realize it's been watching me since the dream started. The dreams didn't stop. In fact, they grew worse. Nothing changed in them, mind you, but the feeling of danger, the unease that accompanied the dream's waning moments, increased steadily in severity. So, it is fortuitous that my father is who he is, a psychologist, one specializing in depth psychology as an outbranch of analytical psychology, Jungian to be specific. I'd never had a reason to speak with him about his profession. I prefer things I can touch and see over the vague and amorphous world of the psyche. But as my health began to deteriorate because of my sleep quality, I turned to him. He began our sessions as he would with any other patient, explaining to me the basics of what he was attempting to do and stressing the fundamental belief that dreams are not to be ignored. He said that in order for any psychic content to become fully conscious, it must be represented to a subject. The subject in this case being my ego, a mirror the light of my consciousness bounced off of in order to view and understand previously unrealized psychic content within me. I nodded politely at all of this, not understanding a word, and told him my dream. He found it odd there was so much detail to it. He said dreams usually speak their own language, and that up until the end of the dream, where I came face to face with the giant eye, the whole thing had the feel of a memory rather than a dream. It didn't help that each time I explained the events that happened, I was able to recall more and more detail. The dream's contents eventually becoming so clear, I could see in my mind's eye our flight log and list every single waypoint numerically and the expected fuel load over said point. Still, my father, every bit as stubborn as I am, resisted, dragging his feet and calling it a memory. He wanted to at least attempt to understand what the dream could mean from a symbolic perspective, especially the giant eye at the end. "It could be you," he said during one of our last sessions together. "Watching yourself. Maybe you're trying to make sure you did everything you could. Survivor's guilt made manifest and judging you. Or it's a part of you looking for answers, trying to get you to see something you're overlooking, or that you've forgotten." I shook my head, and my father sighed and closed his journal, placing his marbled fountain pen on top of it. He steepled his hands together and looked deep in thought. Up to this point, I'd steadfastly refused to accept any of the alchemical or symbolic meanings a giant eye could mean, persisting in my claim that the dream, including the eye, felt real. More than real, actually. I half expected him to kick me out of his office for my intransigence. "Listen," he said. "I have a friend. Recently got DEA approval for a clinical research into some pretty interesting stuff. If I told you there was a chance we could analyze this dream more finely, would you be interested?" I sat up on the half couch I'd been laying on and turned to him. My attention peaked. "I haven't slept in 6 months, Dad," I said. "I'm ready to try anything." My father chewed over the words that next came to him as if he thought I'd bolt from the room on hearing them. "My associate has been on the cutting edge of dream science. It's an emerging field. Squirrely stuff, lovingly called scrying by the few who know of it. By mixing a novel sedative and low doses of dimethyltryptamine intravenously, He's managed to induce a stabilized hypnotic trance that the patient can effectively use to explore their own psyche. You'd be able to go into your own dream and stay there. And if it's a memory, you might learn a thing or two. I stared at him for a long while, unsure whether it was my time in service making me paranoid of failing the many urinalysis screenings we were subjected to, or the shock of my own father suggesting administering me with a Schedule I drug. "You want me to try DMT?" My father held up his hands defensively. "We don't have to if you don't want to. I'm just letting you know it's an option." I rubbed at my eyes, feeling the grit of exhaustion. I rubbed at my temples and felt the dull, throbbing ache that had been my companion for the better part of an entire year. I shrugged and gave a single nod towards my father. I didn't see him for the rest of that week, him moving behind the scenes to allow my last-minute entry into the clinical trial, and me following a strict regimen of diet, abstinence, and meditation at home that he'd said was non-negotiable for my participation. When the day of the study came, I was nervous, hungry, had fasted for 24 hours, but was ready to confront whatever it was in my mind, keeping me from sleeping. Dr. McNair, a squirrel of a man, aged with big rounded glasses, and an unfortunately severe overbite, laid me down on a table and took my blood pressure while having me fill out a pre-dosage survey. The dose would be low, he told me, 0.1 milligram per kilogram, but still enough to induce visuals saturated with meaning. It was the combination of the sedative that would be key here, he explained. My father, standing next to Dr. McNair, took over and explained to me that intent was everything. I had to go into the experience with the dream foremost in my mind. I had to want to enter it. I told him that wouldn't be a problem. When Dr. McNair had administered the cocktail, I felt an icy chill run up my arm, and not so much else for a good while. By the time I thought to speak up, I was interrupted. "Nav, where are we?" The dream, memory, played out as it usually did. But from the outset there was a double vision to it that threatened to ruin me. I, the dreamer, saw from the perspective of the first person, and so knew what it was I thought and felt in each moment. But I also saw the dream impartially, outside myself, as if I was a camera in the corner just above my own shoulders watching everything. After a time, I could view both perspectives simultaneously, and the feeling of vertigo faded. I saw myself walk up to the cockpit, had the conversation with the pilots, and hurriedly rush back to my workstation. I check my moving map, take note of the latitude and longitude, plot them against the INU solution, and see exactly where we're supposed to be. I slump back in my seat, perplexed. The next hour, I can tell time by the display on the FMS, is a slow-boiling pot of activity between myself, the pilots, the mission crew commander, and others of the mission crew calling me on private nets to get a read on the situation, asking why we've been circling a large lake for the past hour. Some have children to pick up from daycare when we land. Others have early showtimes the next morning they'd prefer to get a good night's sleep for. Everyone wants to get back on the ground. It's Major Beck that brings order to the chaos. He's called myself and the MCC, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, into the cockpit for a conversation and draw the curtain shielding us from the rest of the crew. He lets Lieutenant Colonel Harris in on the situation, and I watch as his expression evolves from confusion to concern to anger, then finally belligerence. "We're lost," he states firmly. "Let's let ATC know and get a vector home." "We've been transmitting to Atlanta Center for the last 2 hours and aren't getting anything. Atlanta was our last contact, and that was to hand us off to Robin's approach. Neither are responding." Major Beck explains. Well then, our radios must be broken, Lieutenant Colonel Harris states. Beck shakes his head slowly. James has already been to the forward lower lobe once. Diagnostic came back green. Our radios are fine. Lieutenant Colonel Harris opens his mouth, closes it again, and huffs. Let's check them again, then. Harris is getting angry, upset at the confusion, upset that anything would have the gall to disturb the completion of our training sortie. Major Beck nods to Staff Sergeant James, who stands and once more makes his way to the lobe hatch in the crew rest. When he's gone, Lieutenant Colonel Harris says, Why can't we just fly direct to base? We can give Tower some wing rocks and let him know we're calm out. Major Beck shares a look with Captain Roach and myself, then points out his window to the lake below. We're at Robbins, North 32, West 83. Harris looks for himself, then at Beck, squinting, unsure if some joke is being played on him. Someone spoofed our GPS then, Harris states. Uncouple the autopilot and fly manually. It's my turn to speak up. GPS isn't receiving a signal. We're flying INU. We have been. They can't be jammed or spoofed. It's just math. Lieutenant Colonel Harris looks from Beck to me, and then back to Beck. What exactly are you telling me, gentlemen? Major Beck tries a different approach now. We're saying you're right, sir. We're lost. But we're nearing bingo fuel, and the lake below is the only viable landing field that isn't a tree. Lieutenant Colonel Harris is bewildered. An incredulous expression fills his face, and he explodes. That's not a field, Major. It's a fucking swamp. We have divert options for this very reason. Beck maintains his composure and says calmly, That's just where we came from, sir. Same issue. Hunter Airfield wasn't there. Our INUs... Then the INUs are wrong, Major Beck. We're lost, and our radios are broken. Staff Sergeant James re-enters the flight deck. Without a word, he hands his reader to Lieutenant Colonel Harris. Even I see the system check showing a bright green. Radios check out. Lieutenant Colonel Harris pinches at the bridge of his nose and sighs, composing himself. Do I need to get the crew prepared for an emergency landing, Major Beck? Is that what you're telling me? We're about to ditch this jet? Affirm. The MCC turns to leave, but not before I catch him glance at me from the corner of his eye. I watch my person as I have the same realization my dream self is having. The whole crew is going to think I did this. And maybe I did. I return to my workstation and strap in, tightening my shoulder and waist harnesses. I try to remember our emergency egress procedures and can't seem to recall any special position to hold while bracing for impact. We run through our emergency landing checklist, and the experience is surreal, like it's some kind of joke someone will eventually end. But it keeps going. We make a shallow approach, and there's nothing I can do to help the pilots. The landing is completely visual. I've seen commercial airline disasters and military aircraft mishaps, many times, in fact, for safety studies back at Squadron. But what follows here is, surprisingly, non-disastrous. Make no mistake, our initial impact is jarring. I careen forward and would have smashed my face into my workstation's glass display, but for my backpack placed in front of it as a precaution. We lose an entire wing on impact. The fuselage threatens to barrel roll us onto the unsupported side, but somehow, miraculously, when the screeching sound of metal being shorn away has stopped, we're okay. There's a pause when everything goes quiet. It's a moment in time when I realize we've stopped moving and that I'm alive. I check myself for injury, then turn in my seat to look back at Lieutenant Ewan, an intel officer from Britain, and whose workstation is the closest to my own. He gives me a thumbs up and a manic grin. The egress alarm blares then, and the crew, inasmuch as they are able, organizes into two groups and begins filing for the forward and rear hatches. When the hatches open, Inflatable slides, usually unlatched from the hatch doors on normal landings, now forcefully inflate and provide a way down to the water below, not quite reaching the lake. The jet isn't exactly level, and by the angle of its rest, I can tell most of its weight is supported by the remaining wing. But that's not why our group doesn't egress. Standing there, watching the lake below, Major Beck pulls up short and makes an observation. "We're not sinking," he says. He stays there for a long moment, then runs over to the crew rest area and pulls up the shades and finds both engines on our right wing are half submerged in the muck and mire that must be under only 4 to 5 feet of water. "James," Beck says, "what's your assessment on the likelihood of our last 2 engines catching fire?" Staff Sergeant James's eyebrows raise, but he joins Major Beck at the crew rest windows. "Fuel tanks are completely submerged, sir. Firewall at the wing joint would prevent anything that catches fire from getting to us, but I think it'd be smart to use the rafts and the survival kits to get to shore, boss." Beck walks back over to the open hatch and stares at the lake, his gaze sweeping across its surface. The co-pilot and I join him. "What's the plan?" I ask. He's squinting now, staring intently at the lake below. "Do you see? Are those waves?" "Jesus Christ!" Captain Roach yells, his face going pale. He retreats back from the hatch. I turn to see what they are looking at, but find nothing. It's only when I let my focus stay on the portion of the lake for more than a second that I see it too. The motions I assumed was simply the rising and falling of water, the lapping of a lake, have an intentional aspect about them. Not quite fluid, more languid. I understand then that there are things under the lake's surface, moving and writhing as far as the eye can see. They fill the lake completely. Major Beck's tone is urgent. "Cut the slide and pull it up. We can patch it later. Don't let it touch the water." He sprints to the rear of the aircraft, but he's too late. The other half of the crew, the ones using the rear hatch for egress, have just started sending some of the crew down the slide. "Stop! Don't get in the water! Stop!" Beck yells. By the time he's reached the hatch, Lieutenant Colonel Harris is looking at him dumbfounded. Beck doesn't stop to explain, but instead begins screaming down at those on the slide. There's 2 of them, Lieutenant Villegas and Lieutenant Williams. Villegas has hopped off and she's in the water up to her waist. She waves to Major Beck with a smile, yelling loudly to tell him it's shallow enough to stand. Williams hasn't jumped in yet. Beck's words have brought him up short. It starts with Villegas. Her exuberant expression turns to confusion. I see her look down into the water towards her legs, then she begins screaming, hopping up and down, reaching out for Williams. He grabs her hand, but something strong is pulling her backwards. The first of them rears out of the water, an arc of green flesh and tubed segments with circular cups that line its length. It whips out faster than the eye can follow and slaps a tendril onto the side of Villegas' face. The flow of blood is immediate. By the violent way her face is jerked back and forth, I can tell the grip on her face has teeth. Williams lets go of her hand and scrambles backwards in horror. He's trying to get back up the slide, but it's too steep. More of the things arc impossibly high and bear down onto him. They don't seem to know exactly where he is, and so taste the air, encircling him until one tendril just barely nips the edge of his flight suit's pant leg, and the jig is up. 3 of the arms move as one and begin dragging him back down the slide and into the lake. He screams as he goes. He begs the crew for help, but there's nothing we can do, and the nightmare doesn't stop. The creatures are in a frenzy. More converge onto Villegas and Williams until finally, mercifully, their thrashing beneath the shallow lake stops. There are things floating on the water now, flotsam that bear remarkable resemblance to human limbs. I try not to stare, and I'm helped by the fact that as many as a dozen of the green fingers are sticking out of the lake, straight into the air. Their tips tremble. Then many reach in our direction. They make contact with the slide, begin a slow march up its length. "Cut it!" Lieutenant Colonel Harris yells. "No time!" Major Beck counters firmly. "Unlatch the slide, close the hatch." He runs back towards the front of the jet to see that Roach and I are one step ahead of him, our slide back in the aircraft and our hatch closed. He pivots on his heel to return to the rear, but there's a problem. "It's the landing," Harris says, breathless. "It's changed the shape of the entryway. Hatch won't close." There's no time to think. No time to regroup or mourn the loss of 2 crewmates who've perished. For the rest of the day, we take turns manning the rear hatch and using one of the 2 crash axes and fire extinguishers to keep the crawling fingers from entering. The largest of them won't fit, so they send smaller ones. Tendrils the size of our forearms. It's a bit like whack-a-mole, really. And I can't tell if it's my dislocation from the dream as an observer or the underlying humor of the situation that makes me want to laugh. Those of us manning the hatch certainly don't find it funny. The tendrils adapt. Both the forward and rear lavatories must be manned as well, the creatures attempting to push up from the draining chutes. Where they cannot enter, they attempt to bite their way to us, the fuselage eventually filling with the sound of a vociferous gnawing that lets every one of us on that jet know what we are to them. Hours pass, and the initial panic-driven mania of action has simmered down. In the air is the unmistakable feel of a stalemate and the uncertainty of what comes next. Later, when my shift at the rear hatch has come and gone, I sit at crew rest next to Lieutenant Ewan, my boots and pant legs sticky with the ichor of the fingers I've managed to sever. I have maybe an hour before I'm expected at the rear lavatory, so I close my eyes and am just about to nod off when he says something. "What?" "It's one thing." "What?" I repeat. "Look." Lieutenant Ewan stands and sits down in the seat opposite the one he was just in, pointing at it for me to take his place. I do. "Look at the lake." I stare out the windows using what little light remains of the day to see what he's pointing out to me. "Watch them move." A finger passes across the window where I am. Kinda hard not to. "Not these. The ones out in the lake." I stare out to the lake and can see from the corner of my eye Lieutenant Ewan making a motion with his hand. It's like a fish moving through water. Then he splays it out, freezing in midair. "Movement, movement, movement, stop. Move, 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 stop," he says next to me. "Watch them." Sure enough, I begin to see the pattern as well. There's a 10 to 15 second window of uncoordinated activity in the lake, then an unmistakable pause, where the surface of the water goes completely still. I sit up straighter. What the hell? They weren't doing that before. "It, not they. It, one thing, look further out, right around there, 1/4 mile, each time the movement stops." My breath catches, and my heart flips in my chest. Something is definitely out there. It's big if I can make it out in the dying light. Each time the lake goes still, it rises out of the water, a vague dome shape that, thankfully, appears to be getting smaller. I turn back to Lieutenant Ewan. "You think they're all connected? They're all arms lifting—" "What?" Lieutenant Ewan nods, then shrugs. "One thing." I shiver despite myself, trying to picture what kind of animal is beneath us in the lake. It's a frustrating moment where I can't square what it could possibly be with my understanding of the world remaining the same. Where are we, exactly? What's happened to us? I don't know if I'm the first or last to begin asking himself that question, but a slow realization is dawning on me. The unthinkable has occurred. The inexplicable has arrived. And not just with regard to our crash, but about what caused it and everything that's happened since. I debate going to tell Major Beck about Lieutenant Ewan's finding, but can't see how it reveals any actionable information that helps our current predicament, so I don't. My eyes slowly close again. The gnawing of the arms is gone. It's a realization I'm not even awake to process, until someone who's joined us in crew rest whispers, "The water's gone." I say again, louder, "The water's gone!" We all find our own window along the jet's fuselage and see it's true. A strange moon shines outside the aircraft, so much closer than it should be and impossibly bright. Not only have the arms disappeared, but so too the lake that had been there not an hour before. It's revealed a landscape that is a far cry from its previous state, but only we on the left side of the aircraft, looking towards the interior of what had been the lake, are seeing what the others aren't. The lake has been drained by some force unknown to us, leaving behind echelons of artificial structures underneath. Square-cut abodes and dipteral assemblies have been erected out of bone-white stone. The lake bed is now revealed to be a shallow dome, and at its bottom, a grand portico entrance. There's a light there, faint and green, shining from afar, slipping out from its opening, revealing its greater structure as a monolithic temple. It seems to be cut from a single piece of bedrock of the lake. A debate ensues. Beck argues the crew should disembark the plane and make for shore. Lieutenant Colonel Harris disagrees, stating the crew is safer in the jet and should stay put and wait for help. It's an interesting dynamic. Beck, the aircraft commander, and Lieutenant Colonel Harris, Beck's senior officer and mission commander, pulling in different directions. The military is not a democracy. The issue cannot be solved with a vote. Someone must give. And in the end, it's Lieutenant Colonel Harris. More and more of the crew add their inputs, and it's decided that egressing is the way forward. We test the ground outside by throwing a comm kit out the forward hatch. The entire crew watches it slam into the ground, raising a plume of dirt as it does. Somehow, the lake bed is as dry as a desert. Beck is the first to disembark, lowering himself down the deflated side of the forward hatch. He tests the ground, stomps his feet several times, waiting. He looks up at us and shrugs. The crew follows. We take with us the 2 crash axes, 2 fire extinguishers, and survival kits, standard for any jet in the fleet back at Robbins. When I'm down, I study the exterior of the jet, seeing we've made the right call. There are holes bored into it, some of them as deep as my balled fist, others deeper. Assuming the same thing happened tomorrow, they'd have gotten in. When the last of the crew drops, we make our way for the shore, happy to be leaving the dry lake bed behind. But we only make it half a mile. Surrounding the upper lip of the lake like a moat is a chasm. Sheer nothingness greets us, and there is no way forward. Lieutenant Colonel Harris has the crew split into 2 groups then, each following the outer edge to see if any bridge over the expanse below can be found. But when both halves meet back up where they split, we understand there isn't. We're in a giant bowl with no apparent way out. "What the fuck? What is this?" Captain Roach asks at my side. The question is rhetorical, but I slowly shake my head anyway, looking down into the darkness that makes up the moat surrounding the bowl and kicking dirt down into it. The inexplicable, I want to say, but I don't know if he's had that conversation with himself, so I remain silent. The crew gradually makes its way back to the jet and the deflated slide, and some begin climbing back up without a word. Lieutenant Colonel Harris and Major Beck are discussing shifts to take throughout the night so the crew can get some rest. I look around waiting for someone to say the obvious, but no one does. It can't be me. I got us into this mess. I've certainly lost what credibility I had, at least in their eyes. I don't know if it's guilt that makes me speak up or the thought of what might happen to the crew if I don't. We can't go back up, I say flatly. Beck and Harris look at me. Look at the holes, I continue. They'll be in by tomorrow. I walk over to one of them and stick my arm in. It disappears up to my forearm. So what then? Beck asks me. I turn to look at the structure at the heart of the lake. Others follow my gaze. Are you insane? It's Harris. Whatever restraint he may have had towards me breaks. You got us into this mess. You! He emphasizes the last point with a hard jab to my chest. Absolutely not. You're getting on the goddamn jet. I hear my own voice, quiet, then steadily more confident. Maybe. But if we go back up there and the lake fills up tomorrow, those things will make it inside. Look at the holes. We can't get to shore, and we can't go back up. We should at least see what's down there. Some of the crew shift uneasily at my words. Harris only shakes his head. He reaches to grab me, but I pull my arm away. Captain, you will get back on the aircraft, he says firmly. I understand his words and what they mean. This is a line. I can tow it, or I can walk away. There's no coming back from the ladder, but to go back up means death. Perhaps I fail my duty as an officer in refusing the order, but I will not throw my life away for another man's hubris. It is in this moment I realize on a fundamental level, perhaps one as deep as the soul, that I do not belong in the armed forces. No, sir. There is no more dialogue, no yelling or screaming. I turn and start a brisk walk down the shallow bowl of the dried-out lake, inwards, towards its center. It's not long before I begin passing some of the bone-white structures on either side of me. I hear footsteps behind me after a while, and I realize some of the crew are following. I don't turn to see who. When I reach the stone portico, I have to jump to reach the top of its base and pull myself up onto my stomach. When I turn, I'm surprised to see half the remaining crew has joined me, including Major Beck and Staff Sergeant James. Captain Roach is nowhere to be seen. I help the others up and stare at what remains of the jet in the distance. The others have gone back inside and closed the front hatch. I silently wish them luck. The white stone at our feet is ancient. It doesn't look it, but somehow its age can be felt rather than seen. When the 11 of us reach the entrance of the portico, we're bathed in the strange green light that seeps from it. It illuminates our surroundings, as if the sun were out, our shadows cast long behind us. Beck points upwards, and we see an inscription at the architrave of the portico. It's in a language none of us know, but Lieutenant Ewan calls out to us. He's standing in front of one of the support columns that holds the portico aloft. More writing has been etched on its surface, but none of it as deep and grooved as the script above. In fact, none of it is in the same language, nor does it appear to have been written by the same hand. At various heights, all within the range a man might reach with outstretched arm, are short phrases scratched into the white stone of the column. Lieutenant Ewan begins circling the column, then stops, pointing at one inscription with a finger. Greek. Attic. I can't read it, but here, some Latin. He squints and says slowly, Vitam tuum in venere servarice, necare eam oportet. What's it mean? Major Beck asks. Lieutenant Ewan says, It's archaic, older than classical. It's something like, to find your life or save it, you must kill it. There's a long pause before anyone says anything. You're sure? Beck asks eventually. Lieutenant Ewan shrugs. Pretty sure. What is it? I ask. Lieutenant Ewan points at the words again and says, Vitam tuum is in the accusative case. It's the direct object. Necare eam, you must kill it. It referring to vita, your life. There's another long silence, and it's our flight engineer who eventually breaks it. This shit's saying we need to kill ourselves? Staff Sergeant James asks. Lieutenant Ewan scratches his head but remains silent. I look over the column, circle it once. No English? Ewan responds. None that I could find. I take my knife from my flight suit's right thigh pocket and begin engraving what Lieutenant Ewan has told us. What are you doing? Major Beck asks me. I take a step back when I've finished and look up at the column. If I had to give it a name, I'd say tradition. He takes my meaning and nods. When he doesn't look away from me, I notice that others are doing the same. The weight I feel then, heavy as iron around my neck, must be responsibility. I didn't ask them to follow me, but here they are. I'm not senior here. I shouldn't be in charge, but it seems that I am. Whatever comes next, it's on me. I take a deep breath and decide. I walk forward into the green light, into the temple. The others are gone. It's the silence I notice first, the sudden absence of those behind me, as if they'd all decided to stop walking at the exact same time. I turn to look at them, but they're gone. The brilliant green light is dimming now, revealing what's inside of the structure. It looks like a mausoleum. Giant sarcophagi line the walls either side of me, and the ceiling stretches so far above my head, it's hidden in shadow. As I continue to walk further into the structure, I see that I'm not alone. There's someone there, much further within the mausoleum. They're just standing there. But I can feel them looking at me. As I approach, details fill in that unnerve me. The person is male, medium height, my height, short hair, brown, and they're wearing a flight suit. By the time I get close enough to understand, I'm looking at a simulacrum of myself, copied down to a T. My attention is no longer on that fact. The thing's eyes are what grab me. They are shimmering pools of darkness, terrible to behold, and they threaten to drown me. I don't mean that they're black. Black is still a color. They are moonless nights entire. They are absence. And when I look into them, there's a feeling of terrible hunger within me, but of a kind I've never known before, a hunger to exist, to experience, to be. Those eyes speak of unfathomable epochs of time spent waiting just for this moment. Strange eons that have come and gone. I understand then that I'm experiencing not a sensation of my own, but a projection of its. The two of us are connected somehow. Under its gaze, I feel myself wilt, the flame of my own existence buffeted by a gale I can't begin to comprehend. The hunger returns, and I wince with pain, but I fight it. My hands shake as I reach for the knife at my thigh, and I know only one of us is leaving this oversized tomb. The version of me with night for eyes advances. It has its own version of my knife, but isn't holding it. The closer it gets, the stronger the hunger becomes. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to be scared like this. I can't even think straight, so my feet move and I'm sprinting at the thing. At my advance, it rushes to meet me, and then we're on one another. My knife buries itself into the creature's flesh again and again. Many of the wounds I inflict should be fatal, but it doesn't slow or bleed. It doesn't slow in the slightest at the deep gashes across its neck and face I give it. It isn't until my knife is buried down to the handle at its temple that I give up on the knife entirely. This thing doesn't care. It doesn't register pain or weakness. For its part, it's only interested in biting at me. It lunges at me time after time, and it's all I can do to keep it from tearing out my throat. There is no coordination to its movements. It's feral, like a wild animal in a human body. My experience in combatives aids me. Multiple times it's atop me, attempting to isolate my arms, to get a clear shot at my neck, always my neck, and I manage to grapple my way to safety. But it's on me again. This time, I pin one of its arms to my side, my other hand at its throat. I use my leg to immobilize one of its and thrust up and to the side. I'm on top now. It's thrashing, its one free arm scratching and slapping at my face. The fear is still within me. The hunger and the dread stronger than ever. But my own flame is rising, my will to live, the desire to have my will done, not this monster's. I feel it burning hotter against the dark wind of the creature. My free hand is palming the side of the creature's head, forcing it to look away, its throat exposed. Before I know what I'm doing, I bite down and tear into its flesh with my teeth. It howls now, in pain and agony, but there's fear there too. Warm liquid rushes into my mouth, but I do not relent. I bite and tear and rip at the creature's neck long after it's gone still, and its protestations have quieted. When I realize it's dead, I try to stand and fail, my strength having fled. A strange languor fills me, and all I can do is crawl several feet away and hold steady on my knees. With nothing else to do, I study my surroundings. The sarcophagi are large, too large for any normal person. On their facades are etchings, like back on the portico's architrave. I wonder if they're names. I wonder if this creature was one in a long line of beings patiently waiting its turn. But for what, exactly? I shuffle back over to my copy's dead body and look into its eyes. I frown. The black pools are gone now. In their place are my eyes, and they stare lifelessly up into the shadowed expanse above us. The pools of absence, of void, had been liquid. I'd seen them shimmer with movement as the creature fought, so where had they gone? I pale, remembering the warmth rushing into my mouth as I'd bitten into myself. I wonder then to what lengths a race of beings older than time and far wiser than it would go to escape death. How would they propel themselves into the future? Would the plucking of 200,000 pounds of metal out of the sky be little more than inconvenience? The rest of the dream is lost to me, played by like a show on television and sped up 4 times its normal speed. I see me double over in pain, clutch my throat, then my head, then start to convulse even as the tomb around me fades from view, melting like warmed butter. I'm surprised when I go still, and my eyes close and I lose the first-person perspective that I haven't woken up from the scrying session. The me I see lying motionless was the horse I rode in on. And now the memory is over. Should be. So, why haven't I woken up? I see how the swamps of Middle Georgia reassert themselves into reality, and I'm eventually found by a search party. Still as a statue, submerged to my waist in mud and detritus. They put me onto a stretcher, and I see others from the crew. Only 8. All nearby. Some of them have cuts and gashes on their faces, necks, and arms, all injuries a medic would expect one to have from an emergency landing. But I know better. I wonder at the shade of their eyes, and, were they to open in that moment, if they'd be black as night. All goes dark to me then. There's nothing to view anymore. Surely I should wake now, but I don't. And the dark wind assails me. I feel it's coming and shelter my flame from its attack. It's you, I say. To everything. To nothing. To it. The thing doesn't respond, only throws itself at my defenses desperately. You made me forget, didn't you? You want to snuff me out. It doubles its efforts, but my actions in the dream have given me courage. I know what's needed. Only my will, flamed hotter and brighter. The thing recedes as I remember that it's real and it's there, and that I am stronger than it, and the simple act of recalling damages it. But it doesn't leave completely when I've won. It watches me from some psychic corner of my mind with hate and fear, and I know it's only waiting. And because it has already waited so very long, its patience is absolute. If only there was some way to safeguard myself in the future, some way to keep me from forgetting again. In that place there are only symbols and images, items pressed with meaning. If I could stamp one into my own mind, one that begged me to see and remember, to see. I woke up then in Dr. McNair's office, shivering with a sheen of sweat covering my body. I heard my father yelling at Dr. McNair. You said patients remain receptive while under. You said he'd be able to tell us what's happening. He threw a hand in my direction. He's catatonic. Dr. McNair mumbled something in response, but they both went quiet and looked at me when I sat up. A barrage of questions followed. Both men rushed at me. My father took my hand and cupped my head. But I waved them both away and got up in silence. There were post-session surveys to fill out and blood work to be done, but Dr. McNair seemed to understand I needed to be out from that place. I stopped at the door to the room and said to my father, I'll be in the car. I paused, then added, You were right. How could I tell him the entire truth? How could I tell him I'd survived our crash, but the cost was my new passenger? Something that's waiting for me to forget. Waiting until my flame dies and putters out. Waiting for the moment my will is too weak to resist its gale. But I've beaten it before, and I'll beat it again. I just can't forget.
This has been a tale from the Outer Court, a Cypher Media production. If you've enjoyed the experience, consider supporting future stories at patreon.com/Thomas Stoneking. Until the veil thins once more, we wait for you at court.
Yes.